All, this is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So this is our fifth random chit chat. So let's have our discussions. Steve was first again. Steve, how do you manage to be first every time? DDS says first. Yes, you are first as well. So two firsts. Rubies are red. I'm here. Welcome. Steve, 4 nights in a row. Yes, absolutely. Cat Scratch Coder. Hello. Cat Scratch. Steve beat me. Yes. Simple Garden present. Please welcome. Rubies are red. Evening, everyone. Jenna. Okay. Lying guys. Hello. I don't see Tinkle Thing today. he was quite a mess yesterday. I was looking at the chat afterwards and I was reading his comments. He's hilarious. Okay, perfect. Luffy was here in the beginning. I think he took off upstairs. I'm sure he's going to show up in a few minutes. So Jana said, don't need trolls to censor and take this down. I need you all. Yes. Okay, so what are we talking? Chuck says, embarrassingly dumb question. Is it a goofy myth that using a heating blanket to raise body temperature a few nights after vaccination shot enhances the engendered immune response? I have not heard of this. The only reason, so if I try to think about why this would work, is the following. When we are using heating blankets or when we are warming up the lymph nodes area, the circulation increases. And when the circulation would increase, that would cause more cells and lymph to flow better, and that would go to lymph nodes better. And then from lymph nodes, T and B cells that are trained, they would come out better, more, because the circulation is better. So that might help, but I do not see if that would be a huge benefit. Jana says, seeing would be a dangerous thing. Yeah, warming your body too much can be dangerous, yes. Scruffy Scrubs says, got the Pfizer today. Question, should I continue with quercetin and zinc? Yes. So quercetin and zinc, look, we know that 7 to 14 days after the first dose, we still have the immune system still working. In some people, even up till 29 days after the first dose, immune system is still getting up and getting ready and bootstrapping and wearing its clothes and saying, okay, what happened? So just keep doing your prophylaxis because infection can still occur. Gem R. I want to know if taking ivermectin for prophylaxis, and if I get COVID, Dr. Pierre Corey says you can't transmit it. Is this true? If so, why? So I respect them. Of course, Dr. Paul Marik is my hero. I love him. Dr. Pierre Corey has done a great job of raising his voice to help us all push ivermectin forward. That credit goes to him. But to say that if you're taking ivermectin, for example, you will not shed or transmit is incorrect. The reason for that is the following. Ivermectin's job is to reduce the viral load. It is not a virucidal. And I saw on the FLCCC's page that it said it is an antiviral. Ivermectin is not an antiviral. It is at best a very static drug, or plus immune modulator plus inflammatory modulator. That is all it is. So the shedding of the virus is a function of virus getting into a cell, replicating there, coming out and being present in the saliva. Ivermectin does not probe our immune system to make more immunoglobulins, or does not accelerate the formation of immunoglobulins, or does not kill the virus as it arrives in our body. So because of all of that, I can probably just agree this much, that it is possible that the amount of shedding will be low, but this is not possible that it would just block the shedding. Nancy says, have you heard of Dr. Lee Merritt? She has a video and talks about preventative measures as you do, but she goes off on a tangent about the Chinese sabotaging the mRNA vaccine. I haven't, and I don't think that Chinese are going to be able to sabotage the mRNA vaccine. The whole world is stuck at this time. We are going to come out of it. Humans have always come out of the adversities, and we actually come out stronger. Yes, there is a lot of damage that has occurred. There's a lot of misery and there's a lot of problem, but we would come out stronger. So I don't think anyone in the world can stop us from coming out stronger. So nothing is going to happen. You are very welcome, Jem. Jana says, yes, Amin. And yes, that would be the case. Siddhartha says females have lower mortality from COVID. Yes. So they have lower infection rates as well. Does it mean they have a stronger, different immune system? Related genes, maybe X? No, their immune system is generally better. This is why they have allergies as well. Their allergy simply means a more stronger, robust immune system. And that robust immune system is also expressed in a way that they have lesser infections. And thank you very much for the super chat. I haven't still set up the Patreon. I would do it. Lying Guy says, should a doctor have to push a known medicine to NIH? Who is running things there? So that is a problem, Lying Guys, that doctors, NIH should have been telling the doctors what to do instead of the other way around. Janet Taylor says you cannot transmit if it is dead. That is the point. I'm saying that ivermectin is not virucidal. It does not kill the virus. It can only slow its replication, but virus, when it forms, ivermectin cannot stop the virus from forming as a healthy new virus. So, oh no, new today. Yes, I actually saw that. Pfizer, Moderna, Novavax showed lower effectiveness against the variant from South Africa. Not only that, Novavax actually showed different effectiveness. In one case, they said 89%. In the other case, it was even lesser than 50%. And they were doing the same dance as AstraZeneca did, that, hey, over here, this was the reason, over there, that was the reason. So looks like Novavax has some more work to do. But yes, the South African variant is causing some trouble to the efficacy of these vaccines. I am still not worried, because the vaccine is still creating spike protein, and majority of the spike protein is still a target by our antibodies. So we are still going to be able to fight it. And I don't think that we'll develop cytokine storms or those kind of things. The one and only says, hello, Drbeen, I am in SC, where first South African variant were reported today. Yikes. Yes. Any thoughts? I'll have to check that out. But South African variant is a strong variant. Brazilian and the South African are both robust variants. Helen says, I love Dr. Bean's chat. So informative. Thank you, Helen. So Tamara says, I have been sent a video by the frontline doctors which are very against vaccination. It's being passed around by nurses. How do I debunk this without alienating them on their fears? So a couple of things. One, I was actually invited by the frontline doctors as well, and I spoke in their discussion, and that tiny video clip about hydroxychloroquine has been now watched millions and millions of times on Breitbart. Having said that they wanted me to come in and talk about hydroxy, and there is nothing bad about it. However, I do not agree with a bunch of things. For example, I saw a message today and I was just angry. That message was, if you have the infection, you are breaking down the virus and its RNAs. So when you are walking around, You are giving pieces of RNAs to others, so you are creating their immunity. And I just did not know what to do. Look, if that was the case, then this virus will not move from one person to the next one. The very first infection would not have gone to the second infection, because they were giving broken pieces and not the actual viruses. This infection is spreading because people are giving actual infection. It is not a gift that they are giving wrapped in something to say, okay, here is a gift for you. It is going from the respiratory pathway. So how bad is this message to say that if you are infected? So what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, don't wear a mask. If you are infected, don't wear a mask. Imagine how bad. I am holding the word criminal, how bad this is. So to your question, Tamara, I have to watch that video to be able to see how to debunk it. I am so sick of educated people behaving like illiterates. I think at this time, even illiterates are behaving better than them. So Rick says virus is escaping monoclonal antibodies. Leronlimab, which is more of blocking CCL5, should not be subject to antibody escape. Correct. That is correct. And monoclonal antibodies, when these variants came in, I had this discussion with the cool beans that monoclonal antibodies and some testing system are in trouble. Polyclonal antibodies, vaccines, and normally infected to wild type folks are not in trouble. So similarly, leronlimab doesn't have anything to do with the spike protein itself. It actually just modulates the immune system, so that has no problem. Just like ivermectin has no problem. Vaccines may need to be updated. Ivermectin can still be the same thing and still work. That is the same thing for leronlimab as well. So what else do we have? Yesterday, I saw some messages from Pasi afterwards. So Pasi, if you're here, how is your wife's, your partner's parents doing? I saw a message from you that they have just received the vaccine and they are positive. So vaccine will not cause positive outcome, because imagine that when the vaccine is given in the deltoid muscle, and let's say it has messenger RNA for the spike protein, that messenger RNA cannot make its way from there all the way here and then be picked up in a swab. And so that's not going to happen. Number one. Number two, that RNA is just for the spike protein, which will be actually entering in the cell, then making these spike proteins and presented on the cell surface. If the cell breaks down, the RNA that is outside in the tissue will be broken down immediately by RNases, the enzymes. Our body does not allow foreign material to lurk around freely unless our body is sick. So there is no possibility that vaccine would travel, the RNA would travel from here to here and then would become detected as a virus as well. Laura says, I absolutely adore you, Dr. Bean. Thank you so much for all you're very welcome. Thank you. Jana says, do they test before getting vaccine? No. So they're just giving vaccine to everyone. Dr. Saraita Mahajani says, nicely explained. Thank you very much. G says, can you see Super Chat? Thank you very much. Let's see. Where is Super Chat? Maybe down here. I missed it. G, I missed the Super Chat. My apologies. I think it stays there for some minutes and then disappears. And so apologies. If you had a question, you can ask that question again. G says, I paid for Super Chat. I'm so sorry. I don't see it again, but thank you very much. So Ray says that she asked about ivermectin. G, can you please ask your question again? Shahida says, a 9-year-old from a COVID positive family, 9-year-old, on supplements, otherwise well, would you suggest for ivermectin prophylaxis, sir? So the ivermectin's own targeting, more than 15 kilogram and more than 2 years of age. Everybody above that can take it, 150 microgram per kilogram body weight. So normally younger children, 9 year to 17, 18 years, there is zero uh, cases of death in this. Still, if you wanted to give ivermectin, yes, just give prophylaxis 1 dose and then third day 1 more dose, and that's it. Not weekly as I do for my adult patients. Paul Elkin says, can vaccination cause positive antigen test, not PCR? So the positive antigen test is nothing than the PCR. Positive antibody test is a test where you see that are there antibodies present in the body, that body is reacting. Yes, positive antibody test can occur. Now, the only question is the antibodies that an antibody test is detecting, are these the antibodies on the spike protein or something else? Normally they are on the spike protein. So ideally the positive test should produce antibodies at least. So here are the so MedHead 101, can you compare ivermectin with vaccine? Yes, give me 1 second. And then Jem says, for Goofy the Luffy, yes, thank you very much. You can probably hear Goofy Luffy here now. And then TD here, thank you very much, 5. Now let me explain this comparison. I have done this discussion a couple of times. Let's do it once more. France says we. France is awesome. Okay, so let's do it very quickly. If I go here, let's look at a cell, our system getting vaccinated or our system having ivermectin. So let's say this is a cell. Let's look at the infection itself. When the virus comes in, and I'm just going to use the same color, it's efficient for me to quickly do it. So let's say this is the virus. Virus has to bind with the ACE2 enzyme, and then it sends its RNA in our cell, correct? So let's say if I make it bigger, it sends the RNA inside the cell. That RNA goes to our cell's ribosome, and then that ribosome uses that RNA to make more RNAs. And in the case of virus, there is RDRP enzyme that works. There is chymotrypsin-like enzymes that work. There are many enzymes that work. And eventually what happens is a lot more genetic material for the virus is made and a lot more virus bodies are made. Then these are all the things that are assembled together, and then new viruses come out of the cell. Sometimes they come out and they don't break the cell and the cell keeps manufacturing more. Sometimes they come out and they break the cell. Even if they don't break the cell, usually the cell is going to start presenting these antigens on its surface saying, God, look at this, what do I have in me? And then the natural killer cells or neutrophils or cytotoxic T cell would come and destroy it. So this is the normal behavior of the virus. Now let's say we have a vaccine. Vaccine is the RNA. Instead of the virus itself, let's say we use the lipid nanoparticle. Lipid nanoparticle has the RNA for the spike protein. That arrives inside just like the vaccine itself. And then what happens is our ribosome is going to pick up that tiny RNA for the spike protein, make the spike proteins. These spike proteins will then be shredded, broken down into smaller pieces. RNA would be destroyed, and those smaller pieces are going to be presented on the surface of the spike protein, and then that would cause immune system activation. So when the actual virus comes in, our immune system knows how to respond and it would destroy the virus. The third is the ivermectin. Now, ivermectin doesn't do all this with the immune system. What ivermectin does is that if we have ivermectin present in our cell, so let's say this is, I always make ivermectin as this ivermectin man, who is man, woman, a hero. So here is the ivermectin hero. Its job, multiple jobs. Number one, when the virus is trying to connect with the SARS-CoV, with the um, ACE2 enzyme, the ivermectin man can bind here and repel them. It can defeat the virus from entering the cell. Now realize this, that it is reducing the cellular entry of the virus. It is not killing the virus. That means this virus will, some of these will enter the cell, they will replicate in there, they will come out and they will be shed. So saying that ivermectin somehow would stop from shedding is just wrong. So here, this is one function. This is very different from vaccine. Vaccine doesn't do this. This is very different from our immune system. That doesn't do this either. Now let's say that some viruses still manage to enter the cell. When they manage to enter the cell, the second thing that the virus is going to do is it's going to start making, using the ribosome of our cell to make RDRP enzyme. This RDRP enzyme is a target for, remember, remdesivir, it is a target for ivermectin, it is a target for zinc as well. So many things target this, including ivermectin. So ivermectin would target this enzyme and kind of block it. That means the newer viruses formation will be reduced. Again, the existing virus that has come in will not be killed. That is still functioning and trying to make more viruses, but making more virus, the process has slowed down. It is not fully abolished either. It is just slowed down. So that is the second function of ivermectin. Vaccine does not do this. Third function of ivermectin is that there is a polyprotein. So when the virus makes its proteins, virus will, I'm going to change the color here, virus makes a big stencil of its proteins or its enzymes. Then this is called a polyprotein. Then from this stencil, we need to remove the active elements and make them free, liberate them from this packaging. And for that, there are enzymes that are called, these are viral enzymes that are also part of the polyprotein, but they know how to automatically separate from it and then work on it. This is like a Trojan horse, where the humans were part of the horse, but once the horse was inside, then they were able to open the doors and come out, or somebody opened the doors and they came out. So this 3-chymotrypsin-like protease is an enzyme that is embedded in the polyprotein. This would automatically break off and then work on this polyprotein to liberate and free the remaining people. This is like one person can jump out of the Trojan horse and then open the doors for the rest to come out. Ivermectin can block this guy as well. So that is the third function. Fourth function is that when the and vaccines do not do that. Fourth function is that when the virus is now building, these enzymes are liberated from this polyprotein. One of these enzymes is a message that goes in the cell nucleus using our proteins called importin alpha and beta. Importin from importin alpha and beta proteins that bring in viruses messages to the nucleus, and the virus would ask the nucleus to shut down its defenses and to not release interferons to alert, so that the neighboring cells are not alerted. So this is another function that is blocked by ivermectin. Again, it is not killing the virus that is present, it is just stalling its activities. That is the fourth. And so after all of these functions, the virus that are ejecting from the cell are really low in number. That reduction in number allows the immune system a breathing space so that it can ramp up and kill the virus. The fifth function, which is not directly related to the virus itself, is modulating the inflammatory system by reducing the function of nuclear factor kappa B. These are the 5 functions ivermectin does. Vaccines do nothing like that. So vaccine has a different mechanism. They train the immune system to attack the virus itself and kill it. Ivermectin just interferes with the virus. Every time virus tries to do something, ivermectin would just stand in front of it and kind of play with it. And so the virus cannot really become increased in the numbers it wants to. And that is how it's going to start reducing or stay stalled. Now, if you add on top of it the immune system's response, then the virus would get killed as well. Now, does this mean that somehow the virus will not be shed? That is not possible. So I hope that answers that question. I see a few super chats here as well. So Simple Garden says, for Kyrie, question, Dr. Gustavo Acquired Chang on Twitter says 3 to 20 days daily ivermectin until no symptoms. For long hauler, is that safe 20 days of daily ivermectin? I have used ivermectin up to 10 days daily for folks who are 70, 72 years old and no issues. So that is my experience. I, of course, cannot say it is safe or not because ivermectin has never been used in this way. Rico USA says, it appears both COVID-19 and the mRNA vaccine can contribute to patient having Bell's palsy. Do we know how much debris is created by COVID-19 spike protein when compared to the mRNA spike protein? Is there a problem for long hauler? So interesting question. I can talk about the quantities. The reason for that is that a few days ago, I had done a talk in which I discussed, will the spike proteins be continuously made from the vaccine? So as part of that discussion, I wanted to calculate that what is the amount of spike protein that will be produced from that tiny dose of messenger RNA that we have given in the deltoid muscle compared to the virus. So I would give you this idea. One cell has 10 million ribosomes. These make one spike protein. Ribosomes are like a factory. You give them the RNA for the spike protein. This is like a recipe. They will take that up and make and cook the food, which is the spike protein itself. They can take anywhere from a couple of hours to a few days to make spike proteins. And in that time frame, the RNA will be destroyed and digested and removed. So that means at most one cell can take 1 to 2 days to make 10 million spike proteins. Or if it is a virus, then 10 million viruses. And after that, the RNA is gone, the cell may have been destroyed and so on. So you can then decide that, all right, here in a deltoid muscle are, let's say, million cells that picked up the spike protein, which are fibroblasts and the monocytes and the dendritic cells and the macrophages, not monocyte, but the macrophages, dendritic cells, and those cells. Now compare that to a virus. When a virus will enter a cell, it will also cause the cell to make similar way 10 million ribosomes will function, but instead of 10 million spike proteins, it's going to make 10 million new viruses with tons of spike protein on them. And then within 2-3 days, the viruses would come out and then they would go to the next cell and they would do this. Now, vaccine cannot do this part of going to the next cell and asking that new cell to make the viruses as well, or spike protein, and then going to the next cell. So the virus just continues to, number one, expand in our tissues, which vaccine cannot. And number two, it just keeps going to the newer cells after the older cells are destroyed, which a vaccine cannot. So the actual infection can create billions and billions of infections, or the cell infections, while the vaccine would only affect a few million and then will be stopped. So I hope that answers your question. Nancy says, I love Luffy. Thank you very much. Luffy is running around somewhere. He came back. What else? So Doug, you had asked me this question. I'll talk about my steroids that I use. I use the low potency steroid that is delta cortril. I think it is methylprednisolone. And I use 15 milligram for a few days, and 10 milligram for a few days, then 5 milligram for a few days, and then I stop. That is my regime with my patients. Sharon Staten says, number one, thank you very much for the super chat. Can you give me a summary of the vaccines that don't use fetal cell lines in the manufacturing of the vaccines? I'm in the UK. It's 3:16 a.m. Number one, thank you very much for watching from UK at this morning. Are you taking some coffee or tea or something? So again, thank you. The vaccines, of course, there are 200 or more vaccines. I do not know the names for all of them. The main front runners, Moderna and Pfizer BioNTech, they do not have fetal tissue. They are not manufactured in the copies of the fetal tissue. Although Moderna's design, when they were testing the RNA to say, will it work? They were making smaller pieces of RNA and they were injecting them in the fetal tissue cells to then make the spike proteins to see if the spike proteins were correctly made. So design part of the vaccine was done in fetal tissue cell. And I believe that there was a Vatican's message there that if designing was done, then that is okay, compared to if the manufacturing was done inside these cells. So Moderna and Pfizer for sure away from the fetal tissue. AstraZeneca is in the fetal tissue copies. I shouldn't say fetal tissue, copies of the fetal tissue. CanSino is the copy of the fetal tissue. Eventually, anything that has adenovirus in it will be fetal tissue manufactured. Now, if you think about the Indian vaccine we talked about yesterday, what was the name of that? Covaxin, I believe. That was made in the cells, but these were monkeys' kidney cells. So they were tissue, but that was not human tissue. Then the vaccine, which is the Novavax, it is not made in these tissues at all. And I think that there is in my previous discussion, there is a discussion I've done about fetal tissue. Is there fetal tissue in the vaccine? In that video, I think 7-8 days ago, in the description, I have a link to a site that has listed the major front runners and talked about which cells they use. But eventually, the answer is the same. Novavax, Pfizer, Moderna, and the Indian vaccine that we talked about yesterday. They are not using fetal tissues. AstraZeneca and CanSino, they are using fetal tissue. I'm sure there are more that are using. So anywhere where you have adenovirus, that will be using it. Indian vaccine it doesn't have the adenovirus. It has an inactivated virus, but still made in tissue, which is from monkeys. What else? Amazing Grace says, Dr. Bean, is COVID-19 made up of MERS, SARS, and a gene of the AIDS virus? So not the gene of the AIDS virus, but it is 86% similar to MERS and SARS because this is human. These are coronaviruses, and this is also a coronavirus. The remaining is different gene, but not HIV gene. Jana Taylor says, when will we have answers? Okay, we'll stop. Jana says, when will new variants end? The variants will never end. They would just keep mutating. Our body would just learn to take care of them. Just like we have learned to take care of existing human coronaviruses that are present in 86% of all of us in our throats. They don't do much to us. 14% of the yearly common cold symptoms are by the coronaviruses. They don't even bother us. So these guys will not be bothered as well. G G is so adamant that I paid for the super. G, thank you very much for paying for the super chat. Is there a question that you had which I missed? Mr. J says, is there a reinfection tracker like GISAID? No, I haven't seen that. It's a good idea, but I have not seen it. Maybe I am mistaken. Samina says, whether ivermectin also works for other viruses. Any virus that has, number one, that uses importin alpha and beta, it would work on them. For example, I think West Nile, dengue, HIV, to some extent they use them. Any virus that has an RDRP, it can work for them. Any virus that has a polyprotein uh, protease, it can work against them. So these are the primary ones. And if you look at ivermectin literature, you would see that they have tried it for HIV, they have tried it for West Nile, for dengue, and for a couple of Ebola. It was not very effective there, but for SARS-CoV-2, somehow it is doing very well. James says, thank you for your session today. Very informative. You're very welcome. So, Connie, can we infect others if we get COVID-19 and have ivermectin already on board? Yes. So that's what I explained a few minutes ago. Yes. The amount of shedding will be lower. So probably not in the same dose, but still we will be shedding. Medhead says, I said one more super chat to Dr. Bean. Did you see it? I see this from James. Thank you. And Sharon, which I just talked about. Are there more? If you have a question, you can just ask me. Here is Medhead. Is this the one? Thanks for explanation. What I meant, comparing ivermectin with vaccines in terms of preventing severe COVID and mortality rates. Is it better than vaccine? That is an interesting question. I don't have that data, but so far I have not seen, if ivermectin used properly in prophylaxis and then in early stages, that it causes the severe cases. But I've seen that when ivermectin is given in severe cases, it is not always protective. On the other hand, giving vaccine, so far from the data, is that it always protects from severe cases and death. Mike says he ivermectin women. Yes, so if ivermectin is going to be a man, then it is going to be a woman as well. Shahida says ivermectin Mobeen sir should Nobel Prize. Thank you very much. Okay, so continuing on, Connie says, thank you very much, Connie. G, what was your question? So here is the question. I'm taking ivermectin, half teaspoon, with 145 day, 1, 3, and 5 horse-based dog won't give. What do you think I paid for? So G, thank you very much for paying for super chat. What do I think? I have no comments on the horse-based. If you go to flcccs.net, they have a page there for question and answers. I had linked that page 2 days ago in my ivermectin talk. In there, they have a question that should I take animal ivermectin? They have an answer which may help you. I will not recommend animal ivermectin. TD says, I like G. Yes. Samina, you're very welcome. So Fleming says, Germany said AstraZeneca vaccine only has 8% effectiveness in people more than 65. Is it true? Or I haven't seen that yet. So there are many messages. For example, for Israel that we were talking about yesterday, or day before yesterday, that 12,000 people getting infected after getting the vaccine. I still haven't gotten the actual source of data who said it and the reason and the demography. So I think there are sometimes rumors as well, and there are sometimes not the best journalists and journalistic outlets that use these kind of things. So I have to have a link to look at and data to look at. Rajesh says, how much time do IgG and IgM disappear from antibodies test? After how much time? So we have done this discussion in the past. I actually drew this. I remember what happens is that when you when somebody gets infected, so let's say here they get infected. In case of this coronavirus, in about a week time, and it can be, we know, 7 days, 14 days, in some people even 28 days. So X days, 7 days, 14 days, 28 days. Both the IgG and IgM start forming together. In this, normally IgM comes first, then IgG, but in this case, they both appear first, which means that this virus bothers our immune system so much that our immune system releases a lot of interleukin 4 and 5, and interleukin 4 helps class switch. So we class switch very fast from IgM and we start making IgG. Now, the quantity difference here is just me trying to keep those two lines separate. So these appear. Then in a few months, if we do not have the active infection, these titers start going down. So in this window of time, after a couple of months, 2 months, for example, till this time, the antibodies can actually be seen. If it is an antibody response from our body, which is the T helper 2 type, in some people it is T helper 1 type response, which does not have sufficient number of antibodies. Then once they start going down, then the test would appear as non-reactive. But if our body has actually had the infection, then when we are challenged again, our sleeping B cells would wake up and they'll start making the antibodies again. If we had handled it with the cytotoxic T cells, then this would never go up too high, and our cytotoxic T cells would continue to work. So I hope that answers that question. So there is a question from Arshad. Dr. Akil, question: is it possible even for non-elderly to have poor response to COVID vaccine? Yes, absolutely. There are two things. Poor response to COVID vaccine could be seen as response to that there are no antibodies, and that may be T helper 1 type response, which is not a poor response. And the second is that there can be people who are youngsters and are diabetic, for example, or who are malnourished, for example, or whose immune system is suppressed for other reasons. Maybe they have an organ transplant, or maybe they are going through the chemotherapy, or maybe they have something like HIV, or their immune system is just genetically not healthy. So there can be many reasons that somebody may not respond correctly. Their vitamin D levels are not correct, or their nutritional levels are not correct. So there can be many reasons. Lying guy says, gee, I have it too if they can't give it to expensive person. So, okay, I did not read this. John Morris, thank you very much for the super chat. How soon do you believe statistics on severe outcomes of vaccination cohorts versus unvaccinated from mass vaccine rollouts will be conclusive? Vaccinated versus unvaccinated from mass vaccine. So we saw the results just now. And these are very interesting that there are no severe outcomes, but they haven't yet published the infection thing. I think in another month, we will know more. It will be very interesting data and important data. So Medhead says, question, the 95% efficacy of vaccine is based on 8 in vaccine and 165 in placebo. Will this 95% efficacy hold up with larger numbers? Severe COVID was only based on 1 and 3 people respectively. In theory, it should. And that is the data we are all waiting for. They have given the data for adverse reactions, for deaths, for pregnancies, for anaphylaxis, but the data for how many people actually got infected after receiving the vaccine, first dose, how many days, second dose, X number of days, we're still waiting for it. Ideally, it should probably change tiny bit, but it should be in similar ballpark. We'll see. Gold Country Russ. Question. Wife, 75-year-old with asthma, day 6 of COVID. Ivermectin doses day 3, 4, 5, and 6. Today, 2 at 98 and temperature 99. Should tomorrow be the last dose for ivermectin? She feels much better. Proof ivermectin man works. So you know that I cannot give a specific advice. So I'll talk about my patients. I don't relent with my patients until their oxygen saturation has come back to 96, 97. Their cough has reduced. They have started moving about. They say, I don't feel tired anymore. So till that time, I keep doing it. So I am maybe a little more aggressive, but at the same time, I am very, very careful as well that I call them so often that they become sick of me calling them and asking, how are you doing? So when these drugs are given, then care has to be done as well to see if patient is doing okay. So Margaret says, congratulations, Denise. So congratulations, Denise, from me as well. Cool. So Mamia Les says, Pakistan is using tech Chinese vaccination. Any comments on it? The Chinese vaccination. Any comments? I think Pakistan is using CanSino or Sinovac. I don't have data for either of them. I tried to find a lot of data and I could not find data on them. So, no. The data that I've heard from journalistic outlets, that means that may or may not be believable or correct, does not show to be very positive. But I have to have the data from the actual company and they are not publishing it. Rima says, just don't want to keep answering questions or asking questions on Facebook if he only sees YouTube ones. I actually see all questions here. It's just that questions keep scrolling fast. So that is the only problem. Melanie Goodman. Yes, he answered my question 2 days ago. Please remember Dr. Mean does his voluntary. He can't get to everyone. Thank you very much, Melanie. And Rima saying, Laura, is super chat? Yes, super chat is through YouTube. But Rima, please ask your question. I am grateful to everyone who does super chat, but I have never tried to not answer somebody who's not doing a super chat. I love these messages. Here was one more message from RB Longhauler. RB Longhauler, I saw your message about super chat and then it just went. Where is it? Here. I paid super chat also. Thank you, RB. I was previously on Humira for AS. What is your opinion of tumor necrosis factor blockers for long hauler inflammation? I'm considering adding it to my meds. It is actually good. So we know that TNF blockers are good. Again, please don't add so much that you are not able to combat other normal inflammatory reasons. But from your name, it looks like you are long hauler. So once again, cannot be specific to a person, but TNF blockers are anti-inflammatory, so they can be useful in theory. Cyprian says, is it normal to have lower abdominal pain after UTI? Yes. S. Sun, thank you very much for the super chat. Thank you for your hard work and commitment. You're very welcome. AS says, is it okay to have alcohol after getting the Moderna vaccination? For example, a glass of wine per day. Will this lower the immune response? How about when taking ivermectin as a weekly prophylaxis? Thank you. No, so that should not affect the immune system to this extent that immune system just fails. France says they become sick of Dr. Bean. What a good doctor you are. Yes. It is interesting that today we don't have Tinkle Think. I'm missing him or his noisy statements. So Christy says, do you know about the T helper 2 cell mediated eosinophilia immunogenicity reported in mouse studies with SARS-CoV-1 vaccines as recently as 2008? How they combated this effect in these? I haven't read this. So Christy, I'll have to look it up before I can comment. Louis says that do Brazilian variant can be more lethal. It can escape of vaccines. CoronaVac and Oxford vaccine is effective against it. More lethality. We have done this discussion. Lethality and spread are usually inversely related. If something is spreading faster, usually it is less lethal. There is a window of time from the day of infection to the symptom, which is normally 5 days. So let's say something is more contagious, more infectious, then it may reduce that window of time from 5 days to, let's say, 3 days or 2 days. And then there may be shedding that would occur for the silent time. So it is possible that it continues to spread faster and it is lethal, equally lethal, or it could be more lethal because it is entering the cells fast and causing a lot of damage. The problem is if it is causing a lot of damage, putting a person down on the bed right away, then it cannot spread that fast. So I still have to look at the data where somebody has proved it, that it is fast spreading and more lethal. Maybe it is that way, but having Boris Johnson say that is not scientific data. So I need to look at the scientific data. That's one. Secondly, the question, the effectivity. Yes, effectivity can reduce if the antibodies that are produced against the area that has changed, then those antibodies will not work correctly. So is there a question from Casey says, what's the point of the vaccine if the virus is continuing to mutate? It is not mutating big enough that the vaccines become ineffective. Look, I have done this discussion in the past. The spike protein has about 312 or 212 amino acids. That means about 1200 nucleotide base pairs. 212 amino acids can have hundreds of antibodies against them. Out of those hundreds of antibodies, if 2 antibodies fail, then what? So the 24 changes, for example, should be divided by 6 to understand how many antibodies may fail. So out of 200 antibodies, if 1 fails or 2 fails, it may reduce the efficacy a little bit, but it would not make the vaccine ineffective. Vaccine will become ineffective if the virus has become a new strain. For example, the whole spike protein is changed altogether, or the virus has just become from SARS-CoV-2 to SARS-CoV-3, just like we had SARS-CoV-1 to SARS-CoV-2. That we haven't seen yet. And lucky for us, this virus has a proofreader enzyme in it which corrects the mistakes, so it cannot change that fast. Reynolds Cherry, as a system engineer, your COVID lectures have been very informative and has me now studying immunology as a layman. Absolutely. My immunology discussions on YouTube, although a little older in their nature and may not be as glamorous, they are supposed to be world's best immunology lectures. So in the same channel, if you go to the early parts and look at the immunology lectures, you may like them. So very good question. Would ivermectin work against COVID-1? Yes, because COVID-1 also has a spike protein that also binds with the ACE2. It also has RDRP. It also has the polyproteins. It also causes interferon 1 blockade. But COVID-1 is not as contagious and as spready as SARS-CoV-2. So I do not know what enzymatic differences are there. But generally, if you look at these enzymes, ivermectin should work. Machiavelli says, I heard it cannot repair its RNA. Machiavelli, the idea of repairing in a virus is to repair the RNA. What happens is that when the RNA is duplicated, so what virus does is it brings the copy of its brain, the RNA in our cell, and then it makes copies of those brain or the RNA fragments. Then it makes new bodies and then sticks those RNA pieces in there to make one complete RNA virus with a brain. Once again, there are going to be people who are going to say this is not a brain and what are you talking about? But just go with me for an example. The proofreader's job is to look at the RNA and see if that is constructed correctly. Proofreader cannot look at spike proteins and fix them, or fix the body damage to the virus. Once a virus is formed, any damage to it from our immune system, proofreader cannot do anything. Proofreader can only fix genetic changes when the copies are being made. So Machiavelli, it is actually, proofreader is actually for RNA fixing. So, John Snyder, you're correct that less lethal, more spready means less lethal, but this has a dark time before the silent time. The important thing is this virus's silent time would not stay 5.1 days mean when it becomes more contagious, because it's going to enter the cells faster, it's going to cause more damage, and the person is going to become sick faster. So that time is going to compress down to, let's say, 1 or 2 days. So then once again, virus has lesser chance to spread compared to a virus that is spreading for 5 days versus a virus that is spreading for 1 day. So I still am doubtful that the more spready virus will be more lethal, maybe equally lethal, but more lethal is still, I have to look at data. I'm open to it. It would be an interesting thing for me to observe from a medical point of view, but I need to look at the data. So how effective is Moderna? They said effectivity is reduced a little bit, Moderna CEO said, and he said we are making a booster dose that would bring the effectivity back to the same levels. So I think I'm okay with that. Denise says we're desperate. Of course, we're all. Ivermectin is useful. Good news is that your doctor can now prescribe ivermectin without NIH holding their hand to say, what did you do? Because NIH is not against ivermectin anymore. So you can ask your doctor to give it to you. Now it is convincing your doctor. So, good question. I hope I can pronounce your name. G. Kotiliva Saluva. I'm sorry. Do I have to be vaccinated even though on both variants I did not show any symptoms to you, South Africa? So, if somebody has already managed the virus and handled it, hypothetically speaking, they don't need the vaccine. But that is just my opinion. That is not a specific prescription for you. You should discuss with your doctor. My opinion for my folks, or hypothetically, if somebody has become infected and recovered, what is vaccine going to do for them? Cool. So, I think that this is Gold Contreras says, first I was deplorable and then I became a pro beaner. What's next? Hopefully something good. Jordi says, question, overall vaccine seems safe, but can we say that doctor's death today, second healthcare worker death after vaccine was coincidence? I will look into it. I did not read it. I was preparing for this CDC's report and I was going over that data and things. So I forgot to check. Jody, I would check it out. Cool. So okay, I'm just seeing if there is any more questions. Cool. Yes, Regeneron is good. Regeneron is FDA approved. You can ask for Regeneron if you are in a hospital, and they have approved it for emergency use, and you have a right to ask for it. Cool. So this is it for today. Thank you very much, everyone. Please like, subscribe, and share. There is a link for buying me a coffee in the description. And if you wanted to support this work in general, there is another link for that as well. Thank you very much. Stay safe and healthy. I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow. Tomorrow we'll have Dr. Steve Phillips with us. We'll talk about Lyme, long hauler, and other chronic diseases. I hate to say long hauling is a chronic disease, so we'll talk about diseases. All right. Bye for now.